The year was 2347, and at long last, humanity had done the impossible. Earth had unlocked the secret of faster-than-light travel, and now the stars were no longer distant dreams but destinations within reach. For decades, scientists had intercepted strange signals echoing from deep space, undeniable proof that humankind was not alone. The only question left: would the galaxy embrace them or cast them out? Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching as the stars stretched into streaks of light while his ship sped toward the rendezvous point. He was tall, with gray streaks at his temples and hands that never trembled, even under immense pressure. Beside him stood Lisa Carter, Chief Diplomatic Officer, carrying the impossible burden of representing 8 billion lives. For 2 years, the 20-member crew had trained for this mission, and now the moment had come. Ahead, the Galactic Council station loomed, an immense wheel slowly rotating in orbit around a planet known as Prace Prime. It was colossal, nearly 50 times larger than anything humanity had ever constructed. Ships of every imaginable design swarmed around it like insects around a hive, each belonging to a different alien species. Daniel's pulse quickened as the horizon's edge received docking clearance and slipped gracefully into one of the station's massive bays. The instant they disembarked, they were met by beings utterly unlike humans. Some strode on 2 legs, others floated or crawled, and a few had no bodies at all, pure energy pulsing within crystalline shells. A guide escorted them through vast corridors toward the council chamber, and Lisa whispered that she had never envisioned anything so extraordinary. The chamber was a vast sphere, filled with hundreds of alien delegates seated on platforms that hovered at varying heights. At the pinnacle sat the Vakreen, a reptilian species who commanded most of the galaxy's military. Their scales glimmered in shades of green and gold under the chamber's lights, their eyes cold and precise. Floating nearby were the Sorath, radiant beings of energy who oversaw the galaxy's trade networks. Lower still sat the Morton Collective, a hive mind whose countless bodies acted as one, managing resources across 12 star systems. Daniel and Lisa stepped onto a rising platform that carried them toward the chamber's center. Hundreds of alien eyes fixed upon them as their translation devices hummed softly to life, preparing to render their words into 1,000 tongues. Expressions of grim resolve. Humanity had reached for the stars seeking unity, and instead found arrogance and disbelief. The translator hummed softly as Lisa drew a deep breath and began to speak before the gathered species. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of a world behind it. She declared that humanity came in peace, with open hands and open hearts, seeking friendship and cooperation among the stars. But as she continued, her tone hardened. She told them of the horror approaching from beyond the galaxy's rim, an enemy unlike any they had ever faced. They called them the Devourers. Part machine, part living organism, they stripped entire worlds bare, consuming every resource until nothing remained but silence. For 3 years, Earth had tracked their path through the void, 7 uninhabited star systems erased without a trace. The swarm numbered in the tens of thousands, and calculations showed they would breach galactic space within a decade. Humanity had come not as conquerors or beggars, but as messengers, to warn the galaxy and help it prepare. When Lisa's voice faded, the vast chamber fell into suffocating silence. Then the Vakreen commander, Zithos, leaned forward on his high platform, his voice emerging as a low, venomous hiss through the translator. How, he asked, could a species that had only just escaped its own cradle presume to lecture civilizations that had ruled the stars for millennia? Murmurs rippled through the council chambers. Some delegates even laughed openly. Ambassador Gregory Palmer rose beside Daniel, his voice steady as he tried to clarify. Humanity meant no offense. They came only to share intelligence that could save billions. But the Sorath representative Luminos pulsed with a light that the translator rendered as mocking amusement. Humans, it said, were desperate for significance, inventing imaginary threats just to be noticed. Luminos added that the Council's sensor network covered 10,000 light-years. If such a menace existed, they would already know. For days, the human delegation presented their findings. Telescope readings, spectral analysis, trajectory models, clear evidence of the Devourer's destruction. They even showed recordings of a small moon being consumed. Yet the chamber remained cold. Alien eyes glanced with boredom. Faint laughter echoed across the platforms. To them, humans were naive children waving toys and ghost stories, seeking the attention of their elders. On the final day, the council gathered for its judgment. The Morton Collective spoke, its 1,000 voices blending into one chilling verdict. The council, they said, acknowledged Earth's concerns but found no credible evidence of danger. Humanity was advised to focus on improving its primitive technology instead of spreading panic across civilized space. The words landed like a physical blow. Daniel's jaw clenched. Frustration burned in his chest. Dr. Karen Mitchell, Earth's chief scientist, stepped forward and warned that they were making a fatal mistake, that when the Devourers came, the galaxy would be unprepared, and millions would die. Thos rose to his towering height, his tail lashing the air like a whip. He declared that humanity would be granted observer status, nothing more. They could watch, but not vote, listen, but not lead. Their warnings were dismissed as fear-mongering from a frightened backwater species. "Return to your little blue world," he hissed, "and stop wasting our time." Defeated, the human delegation departed Praxis Prime. The voyage home stretched endlessly. Daniel stood on the bridge, watching the endless stars slide past, the bitter taste of failure heavy in his mouth. Lisa joined him in silence, and for a long time neither spoke. Finally, Daniel murmured that the council would never listen. Lisa's reply was quiet but firm. If they would not listen, then humanity would prepare alone. Around them, the other ambassadors gathered, each wearing the same expression of grim determination. The galaxy had turned its back, but Earth would stand ready, grim expression mirrored across their faces. Gregory broke the silence first, his voice hard with conviction. Earth, he said, had to begin building warships immediately. Karen nodded, adding that every ounce of effort, every scrap of material, every brilliant mind must now serve a single purpose: survival. Diplomacy had failed. The galaxy had turned its back. There was no choice left but to fight for their own existence. Daniel took a slow breath and activated the ship's communication array. His message to Earth was brief but urgent. The council would not listen. The threat is real. Begin preparations immediately. He urged the president to rally every scientist, engineer, and soldier available, because in 10 years, the Devourers would reach them and humanity would stand alone. The horizon's edge slipped once more into faster-than-light travel, leaving the glittering spires of the Galactic Council far behind. No one on board knew if they would ever see Praxis Prime again, or if there would even be a council left once the Devourers began their harvest. One truth burned in their hearts. Earth had tried to save the galaxy, and the galaxy had dismissed them as fools. But humans would not yield. They would not surrender. And when the storm came, the stars would remember that humanity had been right all along, though by then, it might already be too late. In Geneva, President Helen Brooke stood before the United Earth Assembly, her silver hair bound in a tight bun, her expression cold and unyielding. The chamber was silent as she faced representatives from every nation on Earth. She spoke clearly, her words carrying the weight of destiny. The galaxy, she said, had mocked them, called them children playing in a universe too vast to comprehend. But humanity had seen the threat. They had watched it move, devour, destroy. That truth was enough. The Galactic Council had chosen arrogance over caution, pride over preparation. They had 10 years before the enemy arrived. And while the Council wasted theirs on denial, Earth would use every single day to prepare. President Brooke called for a vote, to militarize Earth, to unite every nation and redirect every resource toward building a defense capable of facing the coming storm. The vote passed without a single objection. Humanity would go to war. Commander Jacob Price was appointed to lead the newly formed Earth Defense Initiative. He accepted the mantle without hesitation. His first command was sweeping, Recall every human vessel from deep space, miners, research ships, colony transports. Everything that could fly would return home and be reforged for battle. Above Mars, the Armstrong shipyards came alive. Thousands of workers drifted in zero gravity, welding hulls and assembling engines as humanity's first true warships began to take shape. No longer explorers or freighters, these were destroyers, carriers, dreadnoughts built for survival. The chief engineer, Nicole Harris, had spent 2 decades designing peaceful vessels. Now she turned that genius toward war. Her team worked day and night, integrating salvaged alien technology acquired through black markets and smugglers willing to trade with humans for the right price. The Vacrine refused to sell weapons, but profit spoke louder than politics. Piece by piece they learned, improved, innovated. What began as imitation became advancement when the first Thunderbird-class destroyer. The inner systems desperate to escape what was coming. The Devourers had the advantage of experience and adaptation. They learned faster than any machine, evolved faster than any living species. Dr. Amy Turner joined Jacob and Daniel in the Lunar Command Center, carrying grim news from deep space monitoring outposts. "They've consumed 2 more systems this month," she said quietly. "The swarm's growing faster than we projected." The Devourers stripped every planet bare, turning metal, gas, and organic matter alike into fuel for their expansion. Her estimate was chilling, over 50,000 vessels, and that number would only keep climbing. Jacob asked if the Nova Lance would be enough. Amy didn't lie. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we're about to find out." The final year before contact saw Earth's industry stretch to the breaking point. Every shipyard, every factory, every orbital station worked without pause. New advances poured from desperate innovation, stronger armor, faster engines, improved shielding. Nicole Harris and her exhausted engineers unveiled their greatest creation yet, the Warden-class carrier. Each was a moving fortress, capable of launching hundreds of fighters and sustaining operations for months without resupply. Slower than destroyers, yes, but built to endure. Training intensified. Pilots drilled daily in zero-gravity simulators, running complex fleet maneuvers against AI-generated Devourer tactics. Kyle Bennett's fighter wing learned to abandon rigid formations. The swarm's erratic movement made traditional strategy suicidal. Instead, they adopted fluid group tactics, flexible, reactive, cooperative. Sophie Bennett's Marine unit trained for boarding scenarios, fighting through simulated ship corridors against alien incursions that mimicked what little data they had on Devourer biology. Meanwhile, the Pelzar alliance remained steadfast. Captain Mira Tallis personally delivered intelligence gathered from fringe systems, evidence that the Council still refused to acknowledge. Humanity and the Pelzar stood almost alone in their readiness. Then, without warning, the storm arrived. The first strike hit the Sorath trade nexus at Kepler 442. A station that had been a cornerstone of galactic commerce for 2 millennia. 50,000 ships passed through its gates daily. In a single night, all signals ceased. Reconnaissance drones dispatched by the Council arrived to find horror. The Kepler 442 system was gone. Its 3 inhabited planets shattered. The trade hub erased. The star itself dimmed under the grip of immense organic constructs, leaching plasma directly from its core. The drones recorded the unthinkable. A fleet filling the void around the dying sun, tens of thousands of living ships, each grotesquely unique, their hulls glistening with chitinous plating alive with pulsing bioluminescent veins. The swarm moved as one, no commands, no coordination, just perfect hive-like unity. Moments later, the drones were intercepted and destroyed, but their recordings reached Praxis Prime. Commander Zathos watched the footage in silence, his scales darkening to an angry black. He had mocked the humans, dismissed their warnings. But now the truth burned before him. Still, his pride forbade any admission of error. Instead, he issued a single order: mobilize the Vacrine Armada. 1,200 warships, gleaming with gold and green hulls, set course for the Hydros system, the choke point between the outer rim and the core worlds. The Vacrine had fought 100 wars and won them all. Their formation was flawless. Heavy cruisers at the center, swift attack wings on the flanks, plasma cannons primed. They believed this would be no different. The Devourers came like a tidal wave. There was no formation, only chaos, a storm of living ships that struck from every angle. The Vakreen fired volley after volley of plasma fire, carving through hundreds of enemies. But for every ship that fell, 3 more replaced it. The swarm adapted, learned, evolved. After the first hour, their organic armor began reflecting plasma. The Vakreen's greatest weapon became useless. Biotoxin missiles struck their hulls, dissolving armor like acid. Boarding pods latched onto ships and burst open, releasing nightmares, creatures that tore through crews within seconds. 4 hours later, the proud Vakreen armada was gone. Out of 1,200 ships, fewer than 300 escaped. Commander Zathos's flagship was not among them. Overrun and consumed from within, the survivors fled toward Council space, carrying only fragments of their shattered fleet, and a message. The Devourers were unstoppable. Panic consumed the galaxy. The Council fractured overnight. The Morton Collective withdrew its fleets to defend its home systems. The Sorath vanished into the depths of their energy nebula, sealing it behind impenetrable barriers. Dozens of smaller species fled inward, abandoning their colonies and pleading for sanctuary. And far away, on the blue world the Council had scorned, humanity began to move, the galactic core, praying that distance might shield them from the Devourers. The Council convened an emergency session on Prace Prime, where the chamber overflowed with panicked voices all shouting at once. Luminos, the Sorath representative, flickered in rapid pulses of light that the translator rendered as terror. The being demanded that all remaining fleets pool their forces into a single united defense, but most species refused. They no longer trusted the Council's protection and instead sought only to save themselves. Ambassador Daniel Hayes stood in the human observation section, watching the turmoil with grim satisfaction. There was no joy in being proven right. Only the cold absence of sympathy for those who had ignored Earth's warnings. When the uproar finally subsided, he spoke, and his voice cut through the chamber with commanding clarity. He said that unity might be too late for defense, but not for survival, if they were willing to accept help. The noise died instantly, and every being turned toward the human ambassador. The Morton Collective's 1,000 voices spoke in unison, asking what humanity could possibly offer that might matter now. Daniel replied that Earth had spent 7 years preparing for this very threat, while the Council had wasted time on arrogance and pride. Humanity had forged weapons built specifically to fight the Devourers, and crafted tactics born from close study of their behavior. A surviving Vakreen commander named Zara stepped forward, her scales scarred from battle. She demanded to know what price humanity would demand for its aid. Daniel's expression hardened as he laid out Earth's terms. Full Council membership with voting rights and unrestricted access to all Council technology and resources. He added that an apology would be welcome, but cooperation and respect would suffice. The chamber exploded into furious debate, some species rejecting the humans' demands, others insisting that survival outweighed pride. Pelzar Captain Morales supported humanity's stance, reminding the Council that Earth had warned them and been mocked for it. Now those same humans offered salvation, and the price was fair. The argument lasted 3 days, during which the Devourers consumed yet another system, drawing closer to the core worlds. At last the Council voted, and the majority accepted Earth's terms. The Treaty of Practice was signed by representatives of Earth and 47 alien species, officially granting humanity full membership in the Galactic Council. But there was no time for celebration. The war had only begun. Daniel immediately contacted Jacob Price on Luna, informing him that Earth now had allies and access to Council resources. Jacob replied that they would need every edge available. Intelligence indicated 5 more Devourer swarms advancing from multiple directions. The enemy wasn't raiding. They were encircling Council space, cutting off escape, intent on the systematic extermination of all intelligent life. President Helen Brooks addressed the Council via holographic projection, presenting humanity's plan for joint defense. She explained that Earth would provide weapons, technology, and tactical leadership, while Council races would contribute ships and crews. The Vakreen would spearhead heavy assaults. The Pelzar would handle reconnaissance and rapid strikes. The Morton Collective would oversee logistics and supply chains. Every species had a role in the preservation of civilization. The first step was to establish a defensive line at the Virgon Nebula, a natural choke point between the outer rim and the core systems. Any enemy fleet attempting to break through would meet its stand there. Jacob was promoted to admiral and given command of the entire combined fleet, more than 2,000 ships drawn from dozens of species. Nicole Harris journeyed to Prace Prime with a team of engineers to oversee the integration of human weaponry into alien warships. The Vacrine were fascinated by the Nova Lance and began retrofitting a dozen heavy cruisers with the fearsome weapon. The Pelzar requested railgun systems for their swift attack craft, and Nicole showed them how to install the armaments without compromising speed or agility. Kyle Bennett's fighter squadron was reassigned to the Carrier Vigilant, part of the main battle group stationed at Virgon Nebula. His pilots trained alongside alien flyers, learning to synchronize maneuvers. The diversity in technology and tactics created challenges, but also breakthroughs, as humans introduced fresh thinking to ancient doctrines. Sophie Bennett and her Marine unit were deployed aboard the Defiant, positioned within the forward defensive line. The combined fleet assembled at Virgon Nebula, every ship armed, supplied, and ready for war. The Devourers had already devoured 4 more systems, and their numbers had swelled to nearly 5,000 vessels. The Armada waited at Virgon, the entire fleet briefing the command staff on the Nova Lance's specifications. She explained that each weapon could only fire once every 10 minutes due to the immense energy demands, but that first volley would be catastrophic. Tests had proven that a single Nova Lance could annihilate a Devourer capital ship with a direct hit, or cripple several smaller ones if they clustered too closely. Timing, she warned, was everything. One premature discharge could waste the weapon and open gaps in the defensive line. 8 hours after preparations were complete, the Devourer fleet arrived, a nightmare come to life. 5,000 organic ships moved in hypnotic, swirling formations that appeared chaotic but were frighteningly precise. Their vessels ranged from fighter-sized organisms no larger than transports to titanic capital ships 3 kilometers long, their hulls glowing with pulsing bioluminescent veins. Long-range scans showed the enemy had grown larger than anticipated. Feeding on systems they had already devoured, Admiral Jacob Price opened a fleet-wide channel, his voice reaching every ship and crew member, regardless of species or tongue. He reminded them that this was the moment they had trained for, not a fight for any one world, but for the survival of all intelligent life. His words, translated into hundreds of dialects, carried the same truth. Failure meant extinction. With a calm finality, he ordered all ships to battle stations. Across the nebula, the formation tightened, ships sliding into precise positions. Lieutenant Kyle Bennett sat in his cockpit aboard the Carrier Vigilant, staring at his tactical display as it filled with red icons. The system screamed alarms, warning of overwhelming numbers. His fighter's computer estimated their survival odds at under 40%. Kyle opened a channel to his squadron, urging them to stay tight and cover one another. They had trained years for this moment. Now, they would show the galaxy what human pilots could do. The Devourers struck first. Streams of biotoxin projectiles streaked across the void, slamming into the defenders' shields. Barriers flared under the onslaught. Several smaller ships buckled when their defenses collapsed. Then came pulses of draining energy meant to cripple systems. But human engineers had designed redundant power grids precisely to counter this tactic. The enemy was probing, testing, learning. When the Devourer fleet entered optimal range, Admiral Price gave the order that would decide the battle. 37 human warships and 12 Vacrine vessels unleashed their Nova Lances in perfect unison. Lances of blinding energy speared across space, each beam powerful enough to vaporize a moon. The Devourer formation shattered. Capital ships split apart. Smaller craft vaporized in the blink of an eye. For a few glorious seconds, victory seemed certain. Then the Devourers adapted. Surviving ships expelled massive clouds of spores that absorbed energy and diffused sensors. The fog rendered targeting almost useless. But Jacob had planned for this. He ordered the fleet to switch to kinetic fire. Railguns thundered, hurling tungsten slugs at near relativistic speeds. The projectiles tore through the spore clouds, punching holes straight into the enemy. On the Defiant, Sergeant Sophie Bennett manned a railgun turret, her targeting systems flickering as she tracked hostile signatures through the interference. She squeezed the trigger. The ship trembled as magnetic rails launched a slug faster than sight. It struck a Devourer fighter dead center, shattering its organic hull in a burst of debris. She logged the kill, then instantly locked onto another target. The battle dissolved into chaos as the Devourers pushed through the defensive line. Dogfights and ramming runs filled the void. Kyle's squadron launched from the Vigilant, diving into the fray against agile, nightmarish interceptors. His wingman, Chris Murphy, took a hit. His fighter spiraled out of control and exploded against an enemy capital ship. Kyle reported the loss through gritted teeth and forced himself onward. Hesitation meant death. Pelzar ships darted between enemy fire like silver streaks, their speed saving them from destruction. Captain Mara Tallis led her light cruisers in a daring run against a massive Devourer command vessel believed to be coordinating the swarm. Her ships weaved through toxin streams and boarding pods, hammering the vessel's glowing nerve clusters with missile salvos. The beast reeled under the assault but held firm, releasing waves of interceptors to drive the Pelzar back. Meanwhile, the Vakreen fought with renewed fury, vengeance burning in their blood. Commander Zara's flagship, Pride of Vac, rammed a Devourer capital ship after exhausting its ammunition. The impact tore both ships apart in a blinding explosion, opening a hole in the enemy ranks that allowed 3 Allied destroyers to break through and strike the Devourer's vulnerable rear line. Hours passed, and still the battle raged. The void filled with wreckage, drifting bodies, and the frozen remnants of shattered worlds. The Allied fleet lost 300 ships, but the Devourers were broken, their formations scattered, their coordination gone. Individual survivors fled into the dark. Admiral Price ordered pursuit. No quarter was given. Aboard the Defiant, Nicole Harris fought to keep the ship alive. Fires burned through 3 decks, and hull breaches had claimed 17 crew. She rerouted every available watt to weapons and shields, refusing to yield. Her exhausted engineers patched holes as the battle thundered around them. Kyle, low on ammunition, hunted the last Devourer fighters through the debris field. He downed 2 before a biotoxin round ripped through his port engine. His fighter screamed warnings as power bled away. He barely managed to limp back to the Vigilant, where rescue crews pulled him from the smoking wreck. After 6 relentless hours, silence fell. The last Devourer ships were destroyed or driven into retreat. The defensive line had held. Admiral Price stood on the Defiant's bridge, staring at the tactical display. Victory, but at a terrible price. 300 ships gone, thousands dead. The triumph at Vergon Nebula had bought time, but little else. Intelligence soon confirmed 4 more Devourer swarms advancing from separate vectors, each as vast as the one they had just defeated. The Galactic Council evacuated Praise Prime and reconvened aboard a mobile station. Grim faces filled the chamber. President Helen Brooks appeared via hologram, her expression unyielding. She told them that defense alone would not save them. They must strike at the enemy's heart. The Morton Collective agreed and revealed intelligence from deep space probes, the Devourer's main staging ground, a gas giant in the Ada system, converted into a breeding world. Probes showed thousands of ships gestating in vast organic structures. They were producing vessels faster than the Allied fleet could destroy them. The images chilled the room. The staging ground pulsed with sickly green light, immense tendrils reaching into orbit, releasing new ships every few hours. 20,000 enemy vessels guarded it. To attack was suicide. To ignore it was extinction. Admiral Price proposed a desperate plan. A strike by fast ships carrying a weapon powerful enough to destroy the facility entirely. Dr. Amy Turner stepped forward with that weapon, the Ragnarok device. It would ignite a chain reaction in the gas giant's hydrogen core, creating an artificial supernova that would vaporize everything within 100 million kilometers. Brutal, but it would work. There was only one problem. The electromagnetic interference around the planet made remote detonation impossible. Someone would have to deliver the weapon manually, and they would not be coming back. Captain Daniel Hayes volunteered to lead the mission aboard the Vengeance, one of the fleet's fastest deep-strike ships. Kyle Bennett and his squadron offered to escort. Commander Lisa Carter joined as executive officer. Dozens more from every species signed on, fully aware it was a one-way trip. Sophie Bennett tried to volunteer too, but Kyle stopped her. Someone, he said, needed to survive to tell their story. Their farewell on the Vigilance deck was silent, wordless, final. The strike force, 50 ships from Earth, Pelzar, and Vakrine, assembled at Beta Hydri. Captain Mara Tallis told Daniel that this mission would be remembered for as long as life endured. He answered that he would gladly be forgotten. If the galaxy lived, they reached the Eta system after 3 days at maximum FTL. Nicole Harris, now chief engineer on the Vengeance, ensured the Ragnarok was secured and functional. When they emerged from hyperspace, the enemy was waiting. The gas giant filled the viewport, a rotting, living world birthing death. Tens of thousands of Devourer ships swarmed in coordinated patterns, more emerging by the minute. Admiral Hayes gave the order. Approach pattern Delta. The fleet surged forward. Devourers moved to intercept, forming a living wall. Kyle's squadron launched first, engaging enemy interceptors in a savage dogfight. His closest friend, Lieutenant Pete Morris, was obliterated in seconds, but Kyle pressed on, carving through the swarm. Behind him, the Vengeance and its escorts pounded enemy lines with railgun fire. One by one, Allied ships were destroyed. Nicole fought to keep the Vengeance flying as the hull groaned under continuous bombardment. 20 ships fell in the first hour, but the survivors pushed forward. When a critical moment came, Kyle's crippled fighter, half destroyed, became the key. Refusing to eject, he rammed a Devourer command ship head-on. The explosion tore a hole in the enemy defenses wide enough for the Vengeance to break through. Only 4 Allied ships reached the gas giant's upper atmosphere. Below, they saw the horror, colossal organic towers, birthing pods the size of mountain.